Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 24th episode of the TechShift F9 podcast, a podcast that is dedicated to helping you reinvent your career in the age of technology. How do we do that? We do that by interviewing seasoned professionals about their experience, job pivots, and that can hopefully be a guidance to you. I'm your host, Maurizio, and today I'm very excited about having Yan Fan on the podcast. Hi, Yan. How are you?
I am good. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, yeah, let me just for those of for the few people that don't know who you are, because you're very well known in here in Japan and beyond.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, not at all.
yes, you are. Yan started her career in commodities trading in the U.S. and had a bit of a life changing experience that made her move into coding. And recently, it's been 7 years, right? You opened a coding school here in Japan called Code Chrysalis. I'm a big fan of the work you do. I love the fact that you're helping Japan become much more tech savvy, and you have an incredible entrepreneurial journey that I'd love to explore a little bit today.
Yeah, happy to talk about whatever might be interesting to you and your listeners. I think it's more like a journey in which I was very lost. Yeah.
Well, that's how a lot of journeys start, right? And,
Yeah.
and that's exactly where we should look into, which is how you
Mhm.
define your first job on LinkedIn. By the way, you have one of the best LinkedIn profiles ever, I think. Just the
Thank you.
honesty and the transparency, beside the amazing work that you do. Uh, but you define your first job as a mistake, and you
Oh yeah.
mentioned that obviously you did it for the money, as you say in LinkedIn. But I guess, and now that you've been a little bit older and you've been um, doing your own thing as well. I mean, if you look back at that experience, was there something that else that that job gave you beside, the money? And but just more generally, you feel that when people are stuck in what we call bad jobs, what are some of the ways they can get out of them?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think, I coming out of university and I went to university in the US where it's so expensive, so you graduate with tons of debt
Right?
already, so you're kind of starting your adulthood negative. So for me it was really vital that I find a job that had a decent salary, that had some kind of career trajectory. And it's because I knew that I had like this mountain of debt that I needed to pay off. So I couldn't go and be a philosopher or a poet or,
Right.
an artist. I needed to like actually, make money. I don't regret going into the field that I went into. I think it gave me a lot of experiences. It got a lot of things out of my system. And I think it also kind of showed me, um, yeah, what it's like inside of a big company. And I was able to work with people who were really passionate about what that company did. And so to me, it was really apparent that like that was not the right place for me because I was just so different from them. Like I wasn't living and breathing commodities. I
Right.
wasn't, people were like keeping up with what was going on outside of work and they were discussing it. And that just was not something that I was very interested in. So for a whole host of reasons, I don't regret it. I think it was like it's good to start, I think, adulthood from a low. So you know like how to, where up is.
Oh, absolutely. And I love the fact that you've been able to see passion in people and I guess figure out that you wanted to feel exactly the same way, but perhaps in a different context. And at some point, you developed an appreciation and interest in coding. How did that happen?
Yeah, I I think since I was a child, I wanted to have my own business. I don't know exactly why. I think I liked the idea of control, and as children, you don't have a lot of control. And so, yeah, that had always been in me. And in, let's see, when I started working, it was like 2012, 2013. And around like 2013, there were all of these companies coming out of Silicon Valley that were really changing the way that we lived and did things. And so those were quite inspiring. And I was very much inspired to try to start my own company. So I was going through kind of the usual like newbie entrepreneur steps of like, creating a website or, like kind of putting together the pieces of a business. But each time I would do something or I had an idea, I realized that the thing holding me back was just my lack of tech knowledge. Like I didn't know anything. I remember for this one company that I wanted to start, I was like really happy when I managed to change the background of like our WordPress website. That was that was kind of
Big
like
achievement.
where I was. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember I cheered. I was like, oh my goodness, it's like a different color now. And so I decided maybe this is something that I should really try to learn a bit more about. And it seemed really silly, but then um someone had told me like about this other entrepreneur who had learned how to code on her own and built her own MVP, built her own like demo site. So I was inspired by that to try to dive a bit deeper in. Um, Ended up not really having any ideas that I loved. And so I thought, like, while I don't know what I want to do, might be interesting to try to actually be a software engineer. I don't like my current job. I don't want to stay in my current field. So, it wasn't like I didn't like the company. It's just like I didn't like that entire industry or that the industry, I liked it from like a distance, but like not inside of it. So yeah, I thought I would just do something really unexpected. And because when you come so out of left field, people have no expectations. That's actually
True.
really, really nice, right? They don't know what success means. So you just kind of get to define your own success without kind of that societal pressure. And yeah, because it was really crazy back then in 2013 to be like, I think I'm going to quit this like job that is like that seems really nice. My job looked really great on the outside. I'm gonna quit this
Right.
thing, and I'm going to go move my entire life to San Francisco and try to find a job as a software engineer. Like that was just crazy. um, and so a lot of people would, either write me off or, the friends that stuck around was a really great way to, yeah, a really great way to just kind of like detach and try to figure out, my own path.
That's great. And again, going back to your LinkedIn profile, which again I love, you have as an entry, you're a coder slash field entrepreneur, and I love that refreshing honesty. But in general, one thing I've seen over the course of my career is now how much people actually spending time self promoting themselves and putting themselves out there on a professional level. And I wonder, is this something that you see as an important part of someone's baggage of knowledge and know-how and skill set? And I say that because you sort of had to do that, right? I mean, you went into a space that, like you just said, that nobody knew you would be, know anything about, different location. So you sort of had to self-promote yourself somehow. But what is that works in today's market, you think, from that point of view?
Like promoting yourself. I think it's like when and how to promote yourself that makes a difference. And when to also step back from promoting yourself. Yeah, I tend to really dislike super long LinkedIn's. I think you've seen them
Mhm.
where people will list like every certificate, like every online certificate they've ever gotten and like any tiny roles that they've had or Yeah, for me, it's, I think there is a lot of value in stepping back and blending into the background for a little bit, while you're trying to figure out what your next move is when you're going into something new. I think it's good to come from it's always not easier, but I think being a beginner is really refreshing. Being a beginner is like that really like nice time where you can just ask stupid questions, and what if you come across as if you know everything or you have so much experience, you can't really you can't get away with asking some basic questions. And oftentimes it's that ability to ask basic questions that kind of gives you like that light bulb moment or helps you figure out that next step. So um yeah, I like I like becoming a beginner. Like I think that it's a lot, it's a little, anxiety ridden, but it's
Mm.
also, I think, probably uh the moments where I kind of like end up having a bit more clarity. Uh,
That makes sense. And I think a lot of people that I've come across in the startup sort of tech space over the last few years suffer from not knowing exactly how to put themselves forward. And they have incredible skills, they have incredible talent, great personalities, but it's that anxiety, I think, that is something that hopefully will go a little bit away in the near future. But rolling back to your work at Code Chrysalis, it's very
mm,
well documented. I think the whole tech community really appreciates the work that you guys are doing in Japan. But what's interesting to me for this conversation is your point of view on what it was like building it as a company, and I guess some of the stuff behind the curtains that we don't get to see on a website. Uh, and how did you make that process with your co-founder, with the early employees, with some of the early issues, and how did you get over that? I mean, that's, I think, an interesting, particularly as a foreigner coming to Japan.
um, well, I think so. Code Chrysalis is actually my second coding boot camp. So I didn't come into it cold. I'd done it before. I'd started another coding boot camp in a foreign country from the ground up. And so this one was like even more like intense. Code Chrysalis was, because the previous one I'd done it in conjunction. I co-founded it with another coding boot camp in San Francisco. So there were a lot of things like the curriculum, et cetera, that we already had. And Code Chrysalis was kind of the first time where, we were on our own. So I had to make everything from scratch. Um, so, I think with any company, it's incredibly chaotic. And I think like I've never been a master of anything. I've just been always like a jack of all trades. And I think that's been a good strength of mine. In fact, because in the beginning, you're kind of doing everything, right?
Right.
So luckily I was able to do the teaching because I've been just teaching for fun and also as like a side hustle for years and years and years, everything from like dance to whiskey tasting. I've taught classes. So it's always, teaching has always been kind of like my side hustle. So I had the teaching background. I, had gone through a coding boot camp. I went through like one of the first coding boot camps in that popped up very early on. And so I'd gone through it. I kind of seen it. And then I also started another coding boot camp with them. So I kind of knew how they operated and kind of like was able to like learn and take the parts that I liked. Um, I had worked as a software engineer, so I could put together a curriculum, and I also knew the kind of gaps that other boot camps had, and also what you need to be able to get a job as an engineer. um I have a lot of like stage experience, so
Okay.
since I was like 4 or 5 years old, I've been dancing and like, on stage. And I used to also be an MC. Like my mom ran like a little dance class. And we'd go to performances, and there would always be a technical difficulty, or one of the girls was having like some costume issues, and their mom is like frantically like sewing or like bobby pinning them together backstage. And so I would always get pushed onto stage to stall the audience, right? So I'd get like pushed up as like a 9-year-old and just have to like figure out how to like keep so that was really good training. So was always quite comfortable with public speaking and things like that. Um, and yeah, I was like a decent writer, so I could like, and I'm like a millennial, so I kind of knew social media things. I was like on social media, so I could do that marketing side. And then in university, I did a lot of events. So I was very comfortable like putting on anything from small to large events and all of that. So it was just like a whole bunch of just these like skills that I'd picked up over the years, helped a lot with starting this company. When we started, it was a coding boot camp for English speaking consumers. The business has shifted a bit in the recent years, but we started out like wanting to teach coding in English. And we also had the highest priced course because we wanted it to be high quality. We had all of these extras like lifetime career support and things like that. So it was the most expensive course in Japan. And I knew that in order for us to succeed, we really had to build up trust within that community, because you can't necessarily just like throw up a website, have people read it, and have them go immediately like, oh, I'll give you $10,000, right? Like, you have to really build up that trust outside. It's a very high touch business in a sense, right? And word of mouth is so important, right? Because you're much more likely to hit that pay button or that enrollment button if you know someone who's done it, or if someone that says something good about it. So from the very beginning, building a strong community was incredibly important. So we were doing events all the time. And anytime that I would meet, anyone, it was to either get them to come to an event or offer to host an event for them, like things like that. We lucked out when we first started in that we had one angel. It was me, my co-founder Connie, and then we bootstrapped it, and then we took in one angel investor. And that angel, as part of the deal, gave us space. And we had like this really great, we're still using that office space. We've now taken over the entire floor. And so we had this space, which, as you know, in Tokyo, event space is incredibly difficult to come by. And so we were able to have this kind of event space in which we didn't really have any rules. It was like, you want to bring in catering? Sure. Like, you want to like drink, alcohol? You want to have like some beers? Sure. Like, and so we really used that to our advantage to connect with all kinds of people in the community. And we really didn't discriminate much. Like, we would do stuff with like the sustainability crowd. We would do stuff with like, the LGBT community, with like women who code was a pretty common one. And like just anyone, whether they had to do, with tech or not. And I think it was because, a lot of people who were drawn to us were either already engineers and just like really interested in what we were doing, or were really curious about what kinds of careers they were thinking about coming. And being able to connect with all of these groups, we also helped them get access to like this techie community, right? So if you're from like a sustainability crowd, you might have lots of ideas, but you need to get connected with someone technical who can help you get those ideas to life. And so I really loved seeing those relationships and connections being made, because that's how you get innovation, right? When you take
Totally.
lots of different, you know, people with like lots of different backgrounds, and you kind of put them together and you see sort of like the, you know, the projects that might come about or the friendships that might come about. So it was like beyond just, hey, come here and do some coding. I think it was really about bringing this like sense of community that I really felt was lacking in Tokyo coming here from San Francisco. And, you know, like helping people realize kind of the power of having technical skills, right? Like there was so much that you can do besides just finding a job. Like it was really a career or like a way to impact the world.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you've actually been able to leverage skills that weren't necessarily professional skills. So you weren't developing them for a job. It just for a passion, for an interest, but actually came in handy when running your business. And what I also really like that you guys do at Code Chrysalis is the work on teaching non-coding skills like business English, presentation in English. You give them an opportunity, your students, to present, demo days, and so forth. And the question I have for you is for people that are looking into upskilling themselves, whether it's through a coding boot camp or in other ways, where do you stand on the age-old question of hard versus soft skills? And particularly with the emergence, perhaps, of these no-code platforms, do what kind of skills do people really need in, moving forward in a tech job or tech-related job?
Oh man, that's such a hard question to answer. I think you know, you obviously need both. It ties into, you know, what you were talking about with promotion in the beginning, but knowing kind of what parts of yourself are valuable, what traits you have that are valuable, and maybe where you need to strengthen or identify your own kind of weaknesses. I think you know, at the end of the day, you need a combination of both soft and hard skills. And in many ways, you know, it's hard skills that get you the job if you're, you know, an engineer, but it's the soft skills that really push you past and get you
So true.
promotions, right? And I've been in teams where, you know, there's always that really cranky but very, very technically talented engineer, but because they didn't have soft skills, they, you know, their career kind of just always hit a ceiling. And so I you know, I saw that very much in San Francisco, and you know, wanted to make sure that we were uh, graduating people that knew that knew that it wasn't just about your ability to code, but also your ability to identify and drive business value of being able to work with other people, of being able to negotiate. You know, all of that is so important. So yeah, you know, from the beginning, it was very big part of Code Chrysalis and how we tried to like, you know, differentiate ourselves.
Absolutely. And yeah, and you've been running your own business now for years, and you've had to learn how to find the right people to work with. And I've known some of your um, current colleagues, former colleagues, a lot of excellent people that always struck me with the image that you guys know, and you particularly know how to find the hidden gems, or maybe the not so hidden gems. And so, how do you go about finding the right people to work with?
Oh man, I think, you know, we've made so many mistakes in hiring in the past, and I'm glad that you've met, you know, you've had great experiences. But you know, it's always, I think, a learning process. I think at every step, at every stage your company grows, you have to kind of adapt for like the types of people that you're looking for. And so that can be really tough. And you know, it's not always that you know, that for example, someone who was really great for your company at a certain stage, they're not always the best for the next stage in which your company goes to. And I think that is a really tough thing to identify. And also it's really tough to have that in Japan specifically, because there's all of these rules around like, you know, labor laws and things like that. So, you know, I don't really know if I have any good tips other than just like the usual things that you would
Mm.
find on the internet. I, recently heard from someone that um, they were given the advice of, find someone who hire people who have experience playing like a team sport or being on a team. And I was kind of like iffy about that, but I think I've like warmed up to that idea because you really need to make sure that when in a small company that you're able to have people who will work towards the greater good rather than introduce like various politics or drama that goes on. um, I also think that as the company grows, it's so difficult, and this is a big, I think, not just Japan issue but like outside of America issue, or maybe I don't know, maybe even Europe. But um, if you're trying to grow a company, um, you need people with experience because most of the people working there are probably new to that particular experience. But finding people who have that sort of growth experience is very, very difficult here. So I think in the US, if you're looking for, I don't know, name your random position, and you are looking for that person to help your, let's say, biotech startup, go from uh, 50 people to like 200 people, right? You can probably find that person in San Francisco who's like, oh, my last company, I worked at like this startup and like we went from 100 to like 500. So I understand how your company might change as you get larger, as you get more staff, as your revenue or sales grows, right? Because your company might need to do a little bit of a reorg sometimes, switch around teams or change a particular process, bring in something new. Or you might want to be more aware about how your culture adapts at this stage of your company's growth. You don't have very many of those people in Japan at all. You either have people who've worked in big companies, worked in middle-sized companies, or worked in small companies.
True.
Sometimes you luck out in finding someone who's worked at a big company and worked at a like a medium-sized company, or like, you luck out in finding someone who's worked at a little company and a big company. But very, very rarely are you going to find that gem who's like, oh, I've worked at like a 50-person company and it grew to 1,000 people, right? Over like the 5 years or 10 years that I worked there. And so because of that, you kind of inevitably just hire people who are just new to, they might not be new to the role, but they are new to the experiences in which your company is going through. And navigating that in Japan is so difficult because everyone is just like, it's just, you're never in a moment where someone in the room goes, I've experienced this before and I know what to do, right? It's always a new thing that you're going to have to figure out. And I think that is just so tough to do here. And probably one of the big differences between me and then also my friends in the US who have their own businesses of like, my size or larger, where they are able to hire that kind of expertise. They are able to find mentors who have that expertise. But it's hard to find that in Japan. And Japan is just so specific as well. You can't necessarily, ask for help from someone who's grown or scaled a company in the US because they're going to be like, oh, you just do this and this and that.
That's right.
And in Japan, you can't do that sometimes. There's a lot of laws.
Well, different, so many different things. No, totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to conclude, one last question. What's next for you?
Oh man, what's next? Well, I am currently in hibernation mode. I recently left Code Chrysalis operationally, been working, and came to terms with it like around this time last year that like I think I need to do something else. Like it's starting to get little less fun.
Right.
And I typically operate on this philosophy of like picking the path that is scariest. That's why I
Okay.
like left my job in commodities and did the kind of scary thing of like quitting and going for this pipe dream. But for me, it became scary to leave Code Chrysalis. And so that's when I knew like I have to do this. Like this is something I really need to do. So let's see, I left not too long ago, just like a couple months ago. Um, and also found out that I was pregnant around that same time. So it was a
Congratulations.
nice thank you. In my first child, knock on wood. Yeah, so it was like very well timed in that sense. And I've been able to just enjoy, I don't know, I'm just in hibernation mode. I want to get to that space that I talked about earlier where I really don't want to have any expectations for the future. And I want to be able to redefine what success means to me, and not to other people. And so, I'm right now enjoying my last few months of freedom. And you have children, right? So,
Yes.
I know that my life come April is going to be very, very different. And I just want to enjoy not having anything. Like I just spend my day being the most relaxed person in the world.
And that's great.
Yeah.
Um,
And in at the same time, I'm also just exploring what I want to do next. And I started out with some rules of like, I don't want to do this and I don't want to do that. I definitely want to make money in US dollars because the yen is so terrible now. But the more that I'm researching, I think I don't know if those rules will stand up. But yeah, I have like a small business that I'm working on right now, sort of dragging my feet on because it's really nice not working.
True.
But then I think I'm just kind of mentally prepping myself to do something a lot larger next year, hopefully.
Sure. And maybe we can get you back on the podcast to tell us about the new venture and the baby.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully
Uh,
I'll not be freaking out
You'll be
about
fine. You'll
motherhood.
be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you so much for your time and your insights. It's been great talking to you, and happy holidays.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And yeah, happy holidays to you too.
Well, everyone, this is the end of the conversation with Jan. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay cool, stay positive.